Sir John Carmichael, died June 16, 1600, was a Scottish soldier, the Keeper of Liddesdale, a diplomat, and owner of Fenton Tower at Kingston, East Lothian. He was the son of John Carmichael and Elizabeth Somerville, a daughter of Hugh Somerville, 5th Lord Somerville. The estate and village of Carmichael is in South Lanarkshire. He was appointed Warden of the Scottish West March. In 1573 Regent Morton went to Jedburgh to hold justice courts, and he sent Carmichael to arrest Black John Ormiston for his involvement in the murder of Lord Darnley. In 1574 Carmichael was recommended for a pension from England, given to those of power and influence who could support English interests in Scotland. He was said to be a favourer of the amity, a good executioner, and in favour with the regent. Carmichael fought against the English at the raid of the Redeswire on July 7, 1575 on a day of border truce, and captured Sir John Forster, the English warden and commander, after an argument turned to violence. At the start of the fighting 2 Scottish men, Simonton and Robson, were killed, and Carmichael was hit by a bullet but unharmed. Other witnesses claim 2 Northumbrians, Fenwick and Robert Shafton, were the first casualties. Francis Walsingham asked Henry Killigrew to ask the ruler of Scotland, Regent Morton, to have Carmichael arrested. Forster and his companions were entertained with some expense at Dalkeith Palace and sent home. Carmichael was taken to Berwick to be lodged with the President of the Council of the North, the Earl of Huntingdon, at York. In 1580 he was one of the 25 gentlemen pensioners appointed to attend James VI when he went riding. In September 1587 James VI sent him to ask Edinburgh Council for a loan of 100 gold crowns to buy velvet saddles to give to the French poet and diplomat Guillaume de Céleste du Bartas. In September 1588 he collected the subsidy or annuity money that Elizabeth gave to James VI at Berwick upon Tweed, being £3,000 sterling. In August 1588 a party of soldiers and sailors from the Spanish Armada came ashore and met up with Colonel William Sempill. The Edinburgh authorities arrested them, and Colonel Sempill rode towards Crichton Castle. Carmichael gave chase and caught him, and brought him back to Holyroodhouse. James VI ordered that Sempill should be imprisoned in Robert Gourlay's house. The Earl of Huntly tried to prevent this, and helped Colonel Sempill escape. According to David Hume of God's Croft, the Earl of Angus and Lord John Hamilton argued over precedence in the King's Privy or Outer Chamber at Holyrood Palace. James VI came out of his bedchamber and made them reconcile. Meanwhile Carmichael had made the palace secure, and Angus had to signal to his followers, who were preparing to break in, from a window that all was well. God's Croft mentions that Carmichael was an ally and dependent of the Douglas family. In May 1589 the Earl of Huntly surrendered to Carmichael and Captain William Home at Terrysole near Aberdeen, who brought him to Edinburgh to be warded in Robert Gourlay's house. Carmichael sailed to Norway and Denmark with James VI of Scotland in 1589. James VI wrote from Leith on October 22 to Queen Elizabeth in the English border warden Lord Scrope mentioning that Carmichael was with him. James Melville of Hal Hill mentions that Carmichael did not sail in the King's ship, but in one of 3 other ships, along with Lewis Bellenden, the Provost of Lincluden, William Keith of Delny, George Home, James Sandillans, and Peter Young. On January 1, 1590 he presented Henrik Gildenstern, captain of Bohus Castle, with a ring and a gold chain, for which James VI reimbursed him 3,000 Danish thalers. Carmichael returned to Scotland on April 15, 1590 with instructions for the welcoming party at Leith for Anne of Denmark. James VI sent orders that Carmichael should raise a company of 200 soldiers to attend their landing, and restrain those trying to meet him at Leith, including nobility and ladies. This was disappointing news which led to fears amongst the Scottish aristocracy that the order used in Denmark, where noble titles were not used, might prejudice their ancient rights of access to the royals. Carmichael also carried a letter from Colonel William Stewart to the English diplomat in Edinburgh, Robert Bowes, and another letter to Bowes with a verbal message from the Chancellor, John Maitland of Thirlestane. He was knighted at the coronation of Anne of Denmark on May 17, 1590. He was sent as ambassador to England with Colonel William Stewart in June 1590, and was instructed to tell Elizabeth about the journey of James VI to marry Anne of Denmark. He was also to renew requests made by the Justice Clerk, Lewis Bellenden, for money to help James VI govern Scotland, to maintain an armed guard, and fund an embassy to Germany. William Cecil gave him £500, which he passed to the Colonel and John Skene for use in their embassy to Germany. On July 2, 1590 he was given £3,000 sterling, or £27,000 Scots, for James VI as part of an occasional subsidy or annuity. Carmichael delivered the money to the Chancellor, John Maitland of Thirlestane, keeping £277 Scots for his expenses, and was given a further £3,780 by the King's order for the guard. From the remainder, James VI gave money to a courtier, Sir James Sandilands, for household expenses, to Robert Jowsey for textiles for court costume, to William Shaw for building work, bought gifts for the French ambassadors François de Sibble and Jean Hotman, and paid for the banquet, sugar confections, and gold chains given to Danish ambassadors at his homecoming. The king sent Carmichael and William Stewart of Blantyre to Glasgow to arrest Brian O'Rourke, a rebel to Queen Elizabeth, and take him to England on April 3, 1591. This caused a riot in Glasgow, because the arrest was thought likely to damage the Irish trade, and they were cursed as Queen Elizabeth's knights and the king for taking English angels, the annuity or subsidy received from Queen Elizabeth. Carmichael took O'Rourke to his own house on the way to Carlisle. Carmichael built Fenton Tower in East Lothian, but there was a claim to the title of the lands by Hamilton of Anarwick in February 1591. The English ambassador Robert Bow spoke to James VI in Carmichael's favour, saying that Queen Elizabeth would like to see him rewarded. James VI visited several times, and in May 1592 stayed with Anna of Denmark, attended by his English servant Roger Aston, and had a meeting with the Earl of March in December 1592. He rode with Sir George home with news of the crisis caused by the discovery of the Spanish blanks to a low tower, where James VI and Anna of Denmark were celebrating the wedding of the Earl of Mar and Marie Stuart. Francis Stuart, 5th Earl of Bothwell, attacked Falkland Palace on June 27, 1592, with a force including men from the borders, both English and Scottish. James Sandilands captured 9 or 10 men, mostly of the Armstrong surname, on Bothwell Muir. 5 were executed, but the others were spared at the request of John Carmichael because they were not habitual border reivers. Lord John Hamilton captured Archibald Waucombe of Niddry with other rebel followers of the Earl of Bothwell at the meadow of Lesmedhabo on July 1, 1592, and imprisoned them in Craigenthan Castle. James VI sent Carmichael to collect the prisoners, but one of Hamilton's sons released them. In September 1592 he escorted Captain James Hawkerston and John Hamilton of Ardrey to Dalkeith Dallas, where they were interrogated and threatened with the boot, a device to crush their legs. By now Carmichael's sight was failing, in one eye due to old age, and in the other a film was forming, and it was thought he would retire from court in the Royal Guard. His depute warden was John Johnstone, Laird of Newby. He was murdered by members of Clan Armstrong on June 16, 1600, who ambushed him as he rode to Langholm to attend a warden court. According to a chronicle, he was shot by the family of Alexander Armstrong alias Sandy Ringan, a brother of Kinmont Willie. Sandy Ringan had met with Carmichael as warden, and was disappointed by their discussion, and insulted by a practical joke when eggs were put in his scabbard, to glue his sword so it could not be drawn. Alexander Armstrong and his friends were caught and hung. After the murder, James VI told the English diplomat in Edinburgh George Nicholson that Carmichael had been a better Englishman than a Scotsman, meaning that he had shown partiality to England on the border. James VI told Anne of Denmark about the murder, who, according to Nicholson, said she did not expect him to come to a better end, as a plotter against Mary, Queen of Scots. Alexander Armstrong was executed for the murder at Dumfries in April 1605 after being held a prisoner in Carlisle Castle. Carmichael is said to have married a daughter of Archibald Douglas of Glenbervie and Elizabeth Urbine, Catherine, or Sarah Douglas. They had no children. Carmichael married Margaret Douglas, the daughter of George Douglas of Pittendrake and sister to Regent Morton. Their children included Hugh Carmichael of that ilk, who was Master of Horse to James VI in 1593, went to London in May 1597, and was ambassador to Denmark. He married Sibylla Bailey. Their son John Carmichael was the last of this line, and the Carmichael estates went to a distant cousin, James Carmichael, who had impressed James VI with his skill at court in a jumping competition. Maria Carmichael died May 9, 1626, who was a gentlewoman in the household of Anne of Denmark. She married John Bothwell, Lord Holyroodhouse. Abigail Carmichael, who married Hugh Weir of Cloburn, Lanarkshire. Anne Carmichael, who married Walter Whitford, Bishop of Brechin. Elizabeth Carmichael. James Carmichael. On December 22, 1596 he killed Stephen Brunfield, captain of Tantallon, in a duel. Eventually he was made to fight Adam Brunfield in single combat on Craigman Island. The judges were the Duke of Lennox, the Laird of Buckotch, and Sir James Sandilands. They wore lightweight clothes of satin and taffeta, one in blue, and one in red. Brunfield killed Carmichael in front of 5,000 spectators.